And the topic of this discussion is dialogue or antagonistic practice, the role of social art in the age of radical right-wing populism and neoliberalism. And I have already introduced Suzana and Gluklya to you, but we also have here Barbara Putz-Plecko, who is a visual artist, and since 1997 she has been a professor at the University of Applied Arts Vienna. Since 2007 she has served as the university's vice rector for research and quality management. Great name. She has also headed the Institute of Art Education since 2001 and the Department of Art and Communication Practices since 2006. For more than 25 years, Barbara Putz-Plecko has lectured at various European art schools. Her longest lectureship was at the Academy of Fine Arts in Munich, Germany. As an artist and researcher, she has collaborated with many academic and non-academic institutions and grassroots organizations, and she has acted as supervisor, project partner, or coordinator of numerous art projects. Her main focus has been interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and transcultural collaboration processes, as well as the exploration of participatory practices in the arts. And then Tanja Happel is also here. She has studied art education at the University of Applied Arts from 2011 to 2018? 2019. In 2015, she took part in staging APAM and applied foreign affairs project in Ghana. And in 2017, she co-created an intervention concept for young migrants at the MAC in Vienna. As an artist, she is interested in encounters with people on equal terms. Her work explores personal and socio-political issues. In our preparation talks, Suzana and I were talking about the political shift in Europe and what to do against it. The British journalist Paul Manson wrote in a recent article published in Der Freitag that the current revolts against authoritarian right-wing politics and against machining control are in reality one and the same revolt. And he says, when society accepted the neoliberal idea that the market is an autonomous machine that can think more efficiently than any human being, then the foundation for everything we need to respond to now has been laid. And this is the worship of powerful criminals, the return of anti-universal politics, and to surrender the algorithmic control. We all know Facebook very well, and other, of course, platforms and tools. His answer is to fight for a radical defense of humanism. I think this is also partly what we have already heard in the talks and seen in the presentation. Do you agree with this point, Suzana? And what would you like to add to it? And what is the role of art? I mean, partly we have already discussed it.
I really agree with that, but I would like to go a little bit backwards. You know, when I started my curatorial practice, I come from Eastern Europe, and that was the time of dissolving of one other big state, Yugoslavia. And when I started working with the artists at that time, they were not really interested in anything to do with politics, you know, because we came with other baggage. When political statements were left to politicians, you know, we were intellectuals. We were not, in a way, interested in politics because there was only one political possibility, you know, during the ex-Yugoslavia. And it took really a while until artists understood that their role could be also engaging with political. And now I think that this time is behind us, but I still remember this, you know, negotiation of the role of the artist in the society. You know, how to renegotiate your role from an artist who wants full autonomy. And I wrote in the text about this problem with different aspects of autonomy in arts. and then how to somehow adjust to nowadays, where actually you are as a responsible citizen as anybody else. And I fully agree that actually this responsibility is shared, although sometimes I have a problem that we somehow expect too much from the artist to change the society where we fail as society. So, the truth is somewhere between these two radical ends.
When we talked about this topic, you also said that there is not this, there's not only the fight for the left and against the right, there's something new arising, something new that we have to fight for. But maybe this could be a kind of radical
It's important to mention,
yeah.
yes, it's important to mention that this division between left and right is not so viable anymore. And perhaps this is exactly because of the neoliberal powers, When, for example, in Macedonia just 2 years ago, the government changed from right wing to left wing to social democrats, but the neoliberal powers are so much bigger and they override this difference, I hardly see the difference in the real life politics, in everyday life, from the right wing to the left wing, because of the dominance of the, greed, neoliberal greed of kind of appropriation of everything that is commons, in the country. Everything that is left from the time of first round of privatization now has been privatized and recuperated, appropriated. So in these terms, I think that we really need to engage both artists and activists and social theorists in this, trying to find, something else. Because the left and right are really not the solution. Whatever is on each of the sides, they are fully co-opted under the umbrella of neoliberalism, which is the third, but this is not the third that I have in mind. Sorry. So, we also talked about something else, the radical humanism as a kind of a difference from political correctness, which is one of the terms that was, in a way, coined in order to override this need for humanism, And whenever you mention political correctness, people say, this is just kind of a superficial thing. But I would really say that if this is a mechanism that can lead to radical humanism, I would subscribe to it. Political correctness is not bad by itself. It's how you use it in order to approach to this radical humanism that obviously it's urgent. We saw this work on refugees, and this is something really urgent. It's happening that we need to have our position, and this is not left or right. This humanist position is something that should be maybe on the same level powerful as the neoliberalism, in order to be able to fight it. But I don't have the answer.
Yeah.
It's very interesting what you are saying about political correctness, because I faced in my project with the opinion of social workers who were saying, in the name of social correctness, they were saying, you are doing the wrong thing, you cannot touch refugees like that, you cannot involve them to carnival, it's very dangerous. You have to respect political correctness, because, it is very interesting that political correctness also can be perceived and used as everything that neoliberalism is using. Yeah, because in the name of political correctness, the social worker can say, only the thing we can do in this situation to teach refugee how to sew, how to try to make clothes for children or for themselves, because art is very dangerous, You will use them. The art cannot be here as they are naming it, that it's because of political power.
must say that I understand where they come from, because when I mentioned that I written recently a text about the problems with involving refugees in our projects, it's really not easy. I understand that there are all sorts of ethical questions there and socio-political, and the artists should be trained. Now my new idea to make a project in Skopje is, to make a school to train artists to make social engaged art, because I realize that many artists are getting it wrong. It's training, and social workers do have the training, and maybe we should work with them closely, because it's not enough to start a project like that. You need to have this background. It's serious things, it's very ethically responsible and very delicate. I understand their point, but maybe it's the socio-ethical correctness that they should think about.
We should invent the word.
Yes, because political correctness is...
Yeah, I'd like to ask Tanja, as mentioned several times already during this book presentation, back in 2015, the Angewandte provided a short-term housing to more than 1,000 refugees, exactly in this house for a year in this building. And how did you experience this completely new and strange situation as an artist and as a student at this time? How difficult was it to get in dialogue with the residents, and what was your dialogical artistic strategy in this context?
So it started with a seminar actually of Mickey Martinek that was called What is Needed. So and it started that we as participants of the seminar just spent time in actually this house where the refugees were accommodated, and there were lots of different people working here, social workers, and also people from the technical university. They set up a workshop downstairs, and also former students of the social department from the Angewandte. So I worked together with them in the workshop. They were set up a kind of a wood workshop, and so I spent lots of time there working with refugees. So they came to work there together with us, and with an encounter with the children, this project was set up without thinking of that there was not a big concept behind it. So it was actually just a response for a need. There were lots of children in this house, like I think about 400, and many of them always showed up in the workshop because they just simply needed attention. And I was, at that time, I was always using my skateboard as transportation to university and home. And the children were very keen of this skateboard and very interested. And one boy started to build his own skateboard in a wood workshop. So he just took wood and tried to make a skateboard. So we just responded to that by establishing a stock of skateboards and building up a rental system. So I didn't do this on my own, but together with the social worker and student from the social department, as you mentioned before, Stefan Timmer and Patricia Guerra. Yes. So it was not difficult to get in touch with them or in dialogue with them, especially with children. They came to us and they just showed needs that they have, and we responded to that.
And they also used it to have more mobility.
I mean the main idea behind it was because people here in this house were very isolated and confronted with their own history and troubles and traumatic experiences. And so it was, for me, it was important to get the children out of the house. So the skateboard provided physical mobility, but also a kind of social mobility, because you are able to get outside and to meet other people. You go to the skate park and you meet other people, not other refugees, but just other children, other young people, and you have the same interest to skateboard. And it also takes you, it not even takes you away from the house, it takes you away from the things you're confronted daily because of your refugee background.
Okay, thank you. I just want the last answer from my side to Barbara. Barbara, the Angewandte, as an institution and director himself, regularly comment on political topics. In December 2018, Rector Bast criticized the racist FPÖ video that was supposed to promote the new e-card. The protagonist of the video was an immigrant named Ali, who wants to use Mustafa's e-card, and the dizziness comes up and is commented by, "Bad luck, Ali, it's time to say goodbye to social abuse." And the rector reacted to that, and he wrote, "The trivialization of sedition cannot be tolerated. As a rector of an educational institution which is required to give value orientation, I cannot accept trivializing hate videos by government officials and that they accept them in silence. Vice Chancellor Strache and Federal Minister Hofer, both FPÖ, must draw serious consequences." So that was his press release, and then the FPÖ took consequences, but of completely different form, because they filed a complaint against Gerhard Gras, claiming misappropriation of public funds, because he used a paid-up university account for giving his statement. So this is the strange situation we are nowadays here in Austria. After having this discussion today, and also taking into account how the political situation changed in the last years, but also maybe in the last year, my question is, how can and should the university behave in the future against possible neoliberal educational reforms, to say it more directly in the context of the university, and right-wing populist propaganda?
Oh, that's a question that maybe is too long to answer, sincerely. The good news were that, well, it was strange, as the rector was accused, the day he got the letter in the morning from the legal authorities that he will be accused, the same day in the evening we got an award for our diversity. Well, don't want to call it management. They call it management. It's not a management, but how we deal with diversity. So it's the same government. I mean, it's the crazy situation we are in. And the good news are that after some time of reflection, the legal response to the question is a university rector abusing his facilities by doing this political announcement or making public his statement on the subject. The good news was that no, yes, he has to do it. So it's part of his function, and it's part of his responsibility. So this was somehow, for me, a relief, and I heard that, because I thought, if we are now in a position that we are not really get in trouble because of these statements, from my opinion,
we have to bring to the public, then we really have to find new strategies to deal with that. But it's not that obvious thing that concerns me. It's much more how universities change over years now with this neoliberal impact, and what how they gradually become something that has not much to do with what universities were, or what was their main concern, should be their main concern. And I think it's definitely something we have to be aware of, but there are of course decisions every day, every week to make, where you have to decide which way you choose, and I think we still have more options to form a counterpart to these politics than feel only depressed and they don't act anymore. So as long as I think if I would feel tired enough to be only depressed, I think I don't want to be the vice rector of this university anymore, because then there should be people who have more power. And but maybe, and with this I come back to your first statement, Suzana. I was socialized in the 70s, studying art, and these were times when there were so many discussions about the societal, how art is embedded in the society, and what should be our concerns as artists. So that for me that never was a question, being then a person teaching at an art school, though it's not these short-sighted or politicalization, is that the word you mentioned? Politisierung, yeah, that might result. I mean, it's for me, it's the most important thing is to install something like, or to invite students to develop something like a critical practice. And critical practice always means to reflect also on the conditions of your own decisions. So it's a self-reflective and political process. And so when I say I grew up in the 70s with the idea of the poetic also being political. So this is something that still is one of my, is the foundation that keeps me going. But I wanted to ask, because when I had some hours in the afternoon to think, what will the discussion be about? And then I read, we had a discussion on dialogue or antagonistic practice. Then I thought, why you put an or?
Yeah. Okay, so coming back to the topic of our discussion. I actually thought it would be interesting to discuss this with an or, so, but we could also maybe put an end to it, or it is at the end. So, because if we look at the strategies of radical right-wing groups, such as, for example, the Identitären in Austria, it's very interesting because I was looking at this group and Martin Senne for quite some time. I was watching videos and so on, and it was interesting. Actually, students told me about him some years ago, It was interesting for me to notice that this group, this is a kind of neo-fascist group, most of you might know them, because they're now very popular. It was interesting that he used symbols from the radical left and strategies, situationist strategies from the avant-garde of the 60s and 70s for left-wing avant-garde, Marxist avant-garde artists. But he was very successful using these strategies because his message was much easier to grasp. Because you know the situation was very complex and difficult. It was full of contradictions because it was against the spectacle. And he used the aesthetics and this group and also other artists. And I thought, okay, this kind of subversive or over-affirmation, we were also discussing today about Neues Kunst and so on in the 1980s, maybe this is over now. But the interesting thing is that for this year, he had a new motto, and he said, lasst uns drüber reden, as the new motto. Let's talk, let's get in dialogue. And in every video he says, I have to get in dialogue with the people, we have to get in dialogue with the people. So we have a similar strategy, and this is full recuperation in the best sense. Still I think that there must be also for the arts something left. I think actually Gluklya, what you presented, it was this kind of mixture of a dialogical approach as well as an antagonistic practice. Or not, maybe you want to talk about this. And if there are any questions, comments from the audience, please feel free to say something, to get involved in the discussion.
No, actually, you, of course, we are talking of the famous dilemma, how to not to fall in populism and at the same time keep the dialogue with people. So that is really the fragile border between these two huge topics. And I think it is always becoming, there is no answer, so it's always becoming struggle every day. And each of us, like, until now we cannot maybe find a huge generalization about that, so we have to just keep going and maybe to organizing the more events like that, to talk more about that. And maybe it have to be exhibition about it.
You asked me earlier today about this, what would be the language that would be adequate, whether it's antagonistic or dialogue. Can you be in dialogue with these radical fascists at all? Because it's really difficult from which position you can establish this dialogue. And it's very difficult, of course. And, for a very long time I was not so keen on this carnivalization, to use Bakhtin again, but maybe this is one of the languages that is the only possibility given. Because can you imagine to sit on a table with neo-fascists establishing serious dialogue? You tried, when we went to this community museum of loyalists in Belfast. That was the most difficult experience, to be honest, during the Tracy's project. When I was only witness, I didn't have to do anything. I was just there observing. But when I was looking at Ashland, who is Republican, talking to the neo-fascist loyalist, who was the curator of the community museum in Belfast, that was really a struggle. I felt like I was doing some physical job afterwards, and I could never understand what was the feeling of Ashland. I don't have the tools, the instruments for that. Maybe we can work together and think about, what would be this tool or language or model of artistic practice. Which right now I don't have the answer. There are these attempts this famous artist who makes congresses with radical right wing. I don't want to go there.
Yes. Anyone? Yeah, nice for you.
Yeah, my name is Daniel Aschwander, and looking back at how, for example, this expression of participation changed, I followed that dealing with what we all use, which is the smartphone, which, as a matter of fact, made a business model out of participation, as any social media did. And so in that sense, that would be the factory that you mentioned, that is devaluating by making money on actually what has been a highly appreciated form of collaboration, of working together. As to how to deal with it, it's very ambivalent. As for example, in the time when the refugees came, with another artist, I was busy with exactly doing research on the smartphones, and we recognized, but on the other hand, that for refugees, the smartphones were very, very important machines. They were archives, they were memory storage, they were communication tools, they were even passports, to say so. And on the other hand, we know exactly that anything that is happening there is being tracked, and even in the short years in between the development of Facebook, the development of control of algorithms, make it ambivalent. But I think that this is part of the ambivalent machine. And as now talking about strategies, on the one hand, like Barbara, you mentioned how to train students, how to train oneself, how to train people with critical self-awareness. I think that's a very important way, and in terms, I ask myself very often of like how to embody a certain ethical points, certain ethical standpoints, which means how to relate within groups, how to create experiences that would maybe follow a certain political correctness, if you want so, but in the sense of a practice, not of a heavy self-control, but just of a critical awareness in being, and maybe finding ways of creating small we's, because there was Manuel de Landa, the philosopher, Mexican philosopher, was here recently, and he quoted, or he was speaking about this question: is there can you do a right life in the wrong? And he said, to a certain extent you can, because the machine is not that perfect, and you have to find the points where it's not perfect, and then you have to maybe to do this détournement. You have to try to hack in and find out what is that. And on the other hand, like something I recognized for me changed in between. I used to be very critical towards institutions, and by now I'm starting to defend them and thinking that especially institutions like an art university can really be a stronghold of these kind of practices and of being together and creating maybe models of how to live.
I find it really interesting that you mentioned mobile, the smartphone, because one of my favorite projects that are participatory is a very early project by Ricardo Rodriguez. This Motorola turned into a device for the illegal immigrants border crossing, and this was exactly how he managed somehow to turn one device that is usually seen as a commercial, in something that is really useful. And it was in my presentation, I didn't get there. It's really like you were reading my mind, that every tool from neoliberalism could be used, differently. And even the institutions could work with that, in subversive way. But of course, it depends on who is the rector. Not all institutions do that. Sometimes actually they have also double speech. They promise one thing and then they do the other thing. So it's a very delicate question. I wouldn't generalize. You were right. The generalization in these topics is not viable. We have to speak about the different examples and how the institutions dealt with the crisis, how personalities, dealt with that or gained things because of that. It's each case is different.
Hello, thank you. My name is Ruth Matthias-Bär. I would like to link two things. First thing, I was writing my PhD on the topic of the design of the Carnival Parade, 1939 in Vienna. And actually Carnival, and I was engaged a lot with Carnival also by myself, participating. Carnival, I would agree with Umberto Eco that Carnival is a reinforcement of law. So, because I was always wondering why there is no revolution in Brazil. Many people would go on the street, but they would not fight the government. They're just making critique. And this is allowed, even paid by important people. The other thing is, I'm very interested in this dialogue. It's now when the refugees came to our place, our university was also asked to do some courses or to open courses for refugees that they can participate. And actually at the beginning I misunderstood it somehow and then invented a new seminar. And it was, we then called it, Politics of Fear. It started actually because I found out that I was in Hasselt at a conference of traders. I don't know if you know traders. They were running a Marie Curie project on mediation of public space, and the question was, women students at this conference, they started to talk about fear. And I said it's important to communicate fear in our society, not just to shut up. And all in together we made some interventions. This Political Fear collective, there were most parts of students from social design department and some refugees, and we made some some interventions. And actually, I wrote a paper together with people, but I somehow invented also the listening as artistic research strategy. So listening is something like we have to learn again, and we have to learn also to listen to people. So actually what we did was maybe quite dangerous, so people would not let us make interventions and said, if you do the interventions, the identitarian might come and disturb you, and therefore we're afraid that you do it. But actually you have to do it to show people to listen and react with artistic means, with humor or different strategies, I believe, because if you don't talk, it's very, or how do you make a counter-performance against something like the project of the Identitären and Elfriede Jelinek's piece at Audimax? You have to react somehow. If you just listen, because the Austrian, also left-wing students, they were there, but they did not defend neither queer philosopher Elisabeth Schäfer. She was scared, so they came in and threatened her. 5 people pushed her to the wall, and nobody of the students would do something. She had to scream and run out. Or in Klagenfurt, it was just like watching, making videos, and then putting them on Facebook. But there was no, or very late reaction of somebody who said, stop it. And I think this is what we have to discuss. Why are we scared to react in the moment we need it? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Varsha Kshenova, and first of all, it's just a remark and one maybe a bit rhetoric question, but before doing it, I'm so happy to have Suzana again and to hear this beautiful speech. Thank you so much for this. And saying this, I quite like the way the book is participatory in itself, with all involving the students. Then I'm moving my question now. And I just wanted to add that. Okay, Suzana, you said something very important in the beginning. Who is listening? And my question is more about this perception that we have that the society is homogeneous. It's not. So my question is, whose society? Which society? And then we can also talk about when we can react or we cannot react as well. Because in such societies you can react. And in such societies maybe it's suicidal and maybe it's even stupid. So sometimes you have these conditions as well. So going back, the main thing for me is mostly about such projects, I think, how to make urgencies as really urgent to all of the societies, not only one. So that's what I really would like to say, but I want to all hear about your ideas as well.
It's really important that you ask this question, which society? Because, you know, when we start our careers, when we start imagining, you know, our goals, we start in one certain context, but the society changes, you know. Mm-hmm. With each government, it changes. I remember when I started teaching here, this was not the same Austrian society as it is today, you know. In such a short time, the society changes. So we need to change as well. And this project, as you said, you know, there cannot be only one model that will react to all these sections of society and all these different societies as they change. You have to be Madonna, you know, to reinvent yourself, because you have to respond to the urgency. I'm joking, of course, but actually you have to find a new model that will address the new society that changed. And sometimes these political parties, as Martin described it really well, I went really on further research of this person, you know, he's really clever. Sometimes these politicians, these radical right-wing politicians, are more clever than us. So we need to enter this race, we need to fight. And this is this antagonistic approach, you know. You cannot really be only, you know, tolerant, nice, because this niceness costs a lot, you know, and costs maybe not you, but everybody else who is more vulnerable than you. So we have to take this avant-garde role in a way, you know. This is the question about the role of the artist, you know. And I really, that's why I invest so much in the artists that show this, you know, capability. We know that they cannot change these radical right-wing societies overnight, but you have to try, you know. And if you don't try, if you co-opt with the regime, then we've been there. We know how does it end, you know. This is really the danger. Thank you for asking this question, but I don't have one answer because of this constant flux, you know, of the society. It goes so fast. You know, in just 5 years, Austria changed so much. And I'm glad, actually, that there are still rectors like yours who, you know, take the risk. Because the institutions in Macedonia, for example, a few years back, they never protested against this famous stupid project, you know, with monuments. There were individuals who protested, but the institutions were silent, and we ended up now with hundreds of monuments that we cannot deal with. We cannot move them, you know, the Triumphal Arch, Alexander the Great. There are tons, you know, of materials in the main cities, and only because the institutions never said no, never raised their voice, you know, never took the risk of being loudly against it. So in that sense, I think it's good that you included the antagonistic, you know, in the title.
Thank you for your replica. Because it forced me to remind the performance of my friend, Lars. I would say later his family name because I don't want to say it wrong. He's a Norwegian artist, a left artist, and once I came to cafe where everybody were in Oslo, and he came to me and with a strange looking with the cap, and he was screaming, "I am racist! I am racist! I am racist! I am racist! Do you understand racist?" And he was like, you know, going from other side to this problem that we are usually, you know, working. So I think maybe it's also one of the strategy how to penetrate this problem, like to go deeper to the right, exactly what you said. To maybe do research and I don't know, to be a spy or somehow find the artistic, with artistic imagination, some strategy how to learn more about also way of thinking, how they construct the concept, how they became that. Like more study of this.
And I have to add something that is so common, it became so common now to attack the left for incapability to fight the right. And I also disagree with that. You know, this is the easy way out. There should be some other way. You know, it's lazy in a way.
This is not the last statement because I think we have to come to an end. And Barbara will give the last statement. And then I think we have something here to eat. That is great. I didn't know that. Now I saw it. So yeah, we can look forward to having some nice chat here. Bring something
I don't have to have there's some words now coming back to your question and this, what you said, Natalia, maybe even really invent by observing very precisely the counterpart to really create new strategies. I want to come back because why I asked Martin why he would place an or, because I then sat down and I thought, I have to, maybe spontaneously, I didn't have much time, but find for me an answer what would be the dialogue and what would be the antagonistic practice. And I thought that if I go to the antagonistic practices, I think they are developed from critique and from a vision. And for me, the working methods are manifold, but they are like radikale Setzungen. I don't really know what is the best English expression for Setzung. Maybe some positioning, but Setzung in German still has another... Situating. Yeah, maybe.
I don't speak German, but
yeah,
it sounds like...
Yeah. Could be, yeah. So,
situated knowledge,
yeah, right. And these working methods, I thought they are adverse, opposing moves and practices following different than dominant logics. So this could relate to antagonistic practices. Or they introduce alternatives in the sense of a radical other. Or they provoke reaction. And I thought, what is the quality? What I need to create that antagonistic practice? And I think I need distance. I need to be able to create a distance between me and what I'm observing, but also the quality, of course, to come closer. But the dialogical practice, I thought, it's also built on critique and vision, but as a critical practice, more puts on the potential, I thought, of negotiation. I don't know if you would agree. So it's more I develop what is developed as a provocative community in the best sense. So this is a practice that would more investigate in conflicting positions. It's about building on transversal moving and thinking, I would say. It emphasizes a relational and deconstructive approach, I thought. And artists themselves, they more expose them directly. I mean, they expose themselves to a direct, intense form of contact. They work with this, its potential of this direct face-to-face and this confrontation, and they negotiate this in the development of the work process. So the artistic process is this form of negotiation. And I thought the quality it needs, it developed, it's a quality of friction, of rubbing. So if I am in contact with another person in the discourse, then I somehow have to expose myself in a different way. So I would say sometimes I also think it's not my best fantasy of meeting these persons and talk to them or work together with them to find out how they act. But I need to do it because otherwise, as an artist, I still will project. And I grew up in the south of Austria, close to the Slovenian borders, and we had all these. I grew up in this tension between the German-speaking part of the population and the Slovenian part, and there were all these projections of what would be behind this Iron Curtain. And I know that though it was so difficult to live in that tension, I learned the most by talking to these people that were really in opposition to what I thought. But as long as I didn't come closer, I did not understand how you said, how they... what is their concept? How do they react? And only if I come closer, I really I will be able to find out what could be the strategies also to counteract. So I definitely would build as talk about the and between, because I think the one can be without the other if you're an artist.
Thank you, Barbara, for these nice, really closing words that gives us much more thoughts about the topic. And thank you everyone for coming to this event and for staying so long. It was really very intense, I think. But I think it was very fruitful and very interesting. And now we can continue talking, whoever wants. We have here a buffet, and yeah, I think everyone is invited to join us. Thank you.